try there's a new way. I'm gonna show you the tricks I know. Not getting tired of talking, so I made up a show right now. It's time that you made your mind up. And it can sound a little bit strange. Everybody is talking. You need someone ready to change. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay, 'cause it's the right time. I'm feeling alright. I'm flying higher. I'm ready to scream right now. It's better. Don't miss any highlight. There's something you may like. Once I'm ready to fly. I'll tell how to do it right. So I'll tell how to do it right. It's better. We're feeling alright. We're flying higher. We're gonna win tonight. We're here just for the audience. We're gonna show what you're going through. We wanna find you the perfect drone. There's no one else who can help you out. It's time that you made your mind up. And it can sound a little bit strange. Everybody is talking. You need someone ready to change. I will fight like no other every day. I won't stop like the others. I will stay, 'cause it's the right time. I'm feeling alright. I'm flying higher. I'm ready to scream right now. It's better. Don't miss any highlight. There's something you may like. Once I'm ready to fly. I'll tell how to do it right. So I'll tell how to do it right. It's better. We're feeling alright. We're flying higher. We're gonna win tonight. It's better.
Hey everybody, welcome to Geeksvana Live. Thank you very much for joining us this evening on what is a rather fine Tuesday evening. I think we were expecting a bit more rain today, but it's been a pretty good day here down in Surrey. I hope you've all been getting out and flying and enjoying the hobby as much as you possibly can. Great to see a really good mix of people in the chat. Also great to hear a couple of new people joining us for the first time. If it is your first time watching a live stream here on Geeksvana, let us know in the live chat. Now, we are bringing the second of our special collaboration live streams with the NPCC to you today, and today we're going to be talking about a host of things, including clarification on police powers. We're going to be talking a little bit about FPV, flying your drone around emergency scenes, that type of thing, and really trying to up the knowledge from an enforcement point of view. And remember, that's what we're here today. This isn't the sort of CAA stream, etc. You know, we're talking about how things actually get enforced, which of course that is the police's responsibility here in the UK at the moment. So it's going to be an exciting one. We're also going to be having a Q&A at the end, and we're also going to be building your questions for a future Your Questions Answered, where we bring all the questions that we've had together for a video which we'll be recording very, very soon. So yes, really looking forward to that one. We are tonight again joined by Dan and Steve, who I'll bring in just a few minutes, but we're also supported tonight by Olive, who is in the chat. So if you see Geeksvana in the live chat there, that's actually Olive typing, just in case she types anything that I'd be embarrassed about, including love hearts to people, which is not normally my style. No issue against it, but just not normally my style, shall we say. And also we have our other support team with us today as well in the background. So thank you to everybody that's helping to make this show possible, frankly. So without further ado, let's bring in the guys. One thing actually very quickly, if you have a question which you'd like added to the Q&A, please tag at the beginning of that question at Geeksvana, because then it highlights up and allows us to see which are the questions and which aren't, etc., and that type of thing. So without further ado, let's bring the police in, shall we? Hi guys, how are you?
All good. Good to be here, thank you.
Excellent. Just remember to get as close as possible as you can to your microphones, so we're using a new audio system because obviously we had audio issues last time, so hopefully that will improve things for everybody as well, being able to hear things. So how have you guys been since we last met? Busy?
Very busy, yeah. We'll check the answer there. But yeah, it's non-stop. Obviously, we've had a lot of feedback from the last show, really positive. The engagement from the general public, as well as those that are interested in drones, was really good as well. And also across the police forces as well. Obviously,
Excellent.
there has been a number of police officers of all different ranks seeing the show. So yeah, it's
Perfect, because we are hoping for a as wider audience as possible for these shows and for this information, because of course it is, it's something that everybody needs to get to know. Frankly, it's still newish as far as all of these new rules and what you can do with sub 250s and everything. And of course we've got the potential extension of the legacy period and transition periods coming up, etc. So there's always things changing and always things happening, which is why I appreciate you guys taking the time to come on and being the two brave souls to have the questions fired at, etc.
The men.
Yes, indeed.
pleasure is ours.
So we'll get straight into our first subject, and this is a really interesting one, and it's one that the nuances of it and the clarification I feel is important. We did speak about this in our first show, which is essentially, as I've titled it in our run order, clarification of police powers. And really, what we need to look at here from the feedback that I've had from the audience, etc., is, what are those police powers, and critically, when do they kick in? So if you as a police officer was to approach me in a park and I'm flying my drone, at what point would you be, I say allowed, but only in the loosest sense, allowed to instruct me to land that drone and, confiscate drone, operator ID, etc., that type of thing? Could you run through things there?
Yeah, definitely. The most important part really is that we're not trying to, we're here to facilitate and, be part of the drone community. We're not here to be the fun police, as it were. So our start for 10 position wouldn't be that we want to walk straight up to you and make you, ground your drone and,
Yes,
kill your entertainment, as it were. So really, we're only going to get involved and, ask you to, maybe if we ever do ask you to ground your drone, there's going to be a perfectly good reason for it, which I'm hoping the officers will explain at the time. So if you're out there flying your drone and there's no reason for us to come and talk to you, we're not going to go out of our way to come over there and make you bring your drone down, do this, do that. Ideally, the police on the street are going to be extremely busy and they'll be taking care of business elsewhere.
Yes, indeed, because obviously from a police priority point of view, it isn't, going to every park in the UK and finding out, has everybody got an operator IDs, are you flying the right distances, everything else. It's not. I try to explain to people that it's not an active thing, because of course you guys have got some very important priorities out there right now.
Really, unless it's an event where there are, things put in place to keep the airspace free or uncluttered, it's either going to come from either members of the public or other areas of intelligence saying that there might be an issue. Can we go and investigate it? And that part of investigation might just be a very simple chat.
Yes,
and we need to relieve our concerns about what's going on. And once we've done that to a happy conclusion, then we'll be on our way, ideally.
Indeed. So that point then, because this has been one of the points that has caused perhaps the most, not necessarily controversy, but discussion within the hobby on the online groups, etc., is the point where an officer approaches someone flying their drone and they want them to land it. What does the officer require to be able to insist that drone comes down? Do you have to have evidence that I've committed a crime, or what is the benchmark?
The benchmark now is suspicion of any offence.
Okay.
Excuse me. So it doesn't have to be a drone-related offence. It could be any offence, and that drone could just be facilitating that other piece of crime. So it's not even a honest held belief. It's just suspicion.
Okay.
That we can ask you to ground that drone. Now, obviously, we want to educate our officers that not to stand in front of pilots and make it awkward and say just bring it down now. Because a lot of the police aren't going to be pilots. They're not going to understand, what's involved in bringing a drone back safely and doing this. Of course. But, if you are instructed to bring, to ground your drone, then obviously we do have the power to do that. And that instance will be explained to you about justification and rationale about why. And it's going to be a lot safer to carry on, have that conversation for if the drone is out sky.
Yes.
And then we can concentrate properly. and things would go a lot smoother and quicker.
So would that happen then from the point of view that an officer that's approaching that would like me to land because they have reasonable suspicion? You're saying that will obviously be explained. Will they explain what the reasonable suspicion is of? So will they say, I have reasonable suspicion that you are, X, Y, Z, and be specific, or will they just say a crime? I have reasonable suspicion that there might be a crime occurring, and I want you to land.
I mean, it all depends to the officer on the street and what's going on at the time and how quickly they need that to happen. For some people, it might be, can you ground a drone, please, for me? I've got, a suspicion of a crime is taking place, or not a crime, or
Yes.
there's a reason for it, and they might hopefully leave you to it, bring it back down, and then you can have that adult conversation.
Excellent.
Or if there's the opportunity, they might tell you exactly why, because of this or that, or the location, or something else might be going on that the pilot's unaware of as well.
Yes,
So,
indeed.
Again, it could,
Because again, often we don't want to give the impression that every time a police officer is going to come up to you, they're going to be saying reasonable suspicion of.
No.
Because of course, they're more likely to have a conversation with you and say, hey, this is happening, or hey, that's happening, or hey, what are you doing? And obviously, that officer's going to know it's safer to have that conversation with the drone on the ground, of course, than it up there, etc., with the person distracted.
Absolutely. As I said, we're not going there to just, bring drones down for fishing for anything else. It's because there's been a reason we've got either intelligence or member of the public or something else, and we need to just investigate and take it further.
Good, excellent. Okay, and in terms of operator ID and flyer ID and that type of thing, which I've seen recently has started to get mixed up a little bit in terms of giving across your personal details, which I know, and I don't have an issue with it myself. I'm often actually, whenever everyone pulled over in my car or anything, I've actually already got my license out by the time the officers come alongside the car. Actually, I think it just negates a whole big part of the conversation. But as far as when I have to show you my operator ID or flyer ID and that type of thing, is that the same area of the police powers from the point of view of reasonable suspicion, or is there something specific there?
So the reasonable suspicion comes for asking you to ground the drone in the first place, and then there's more powers for that being given to us about investigating, possible offences going forward. And again, those, with those new powers, that will allow us to ask you these questions about your flyer ID, everything else, about, what category you're flying in.
Yes.
And if you've got that information to hand, because there's a good chance, if I'm honest, at the moment, you're probably going to be a lot more knowledgeable than the officer asking you, unless it's, from a dedicated drone team.
Of course.
If you've got those details to hand, you could probably be really useful, and it will speed up the whole process, and you'll hopefully be back in the air doing your thing again.
Excellent.
And
Dan, anything else?
Yeah, obviously, if the police believe a flight is taking place as well, then there is a power to still require that information, the op ID, flyer ID, etc. And I think...
Right. Okay.
So going back to what Steve was saying before about, when we're approaching an operator that's flying, I know there's some question or some discussion around, well, is the officer going to distract me? That's going to cause a safety issue to the drones and it's operating. And I think we've got to be really sort of apply common sense with it. To operate a drone, you've got to multitask. If someone comes and approaches you to say, I require you to land this drone because I suspect an offence has taken place, or I believe a flight has taken place, when you are required, it's not an option. It's a lawful direction to do that. And if you don't, then obviously it commits an offence. Now, obviously, when you were saying about, do we talk about we've got reasonable suspicion about this, and that, my advice would be that we don't go into detail, because you do tend to then start looking at distraction. It'd just be a case of, I require you to land the drone, you explain the power, and you wait for the operator to land that drone as soon as practicable.
Okay, excellent. So we're talking about nuances. So please, if I get something wrong, please do correct me, as I'm sort of putting it into hobby speak, as it were. So there is also a situation where the flight will have concluded, which often will happen, of course, when you guys go looking for a drone pilot. You spot a guy over there with a controller in his hands and a drone on the floor, and there's a flight that you have an issue with, or that you want to check out. Then actually, just the fact that you feel that he was probably that pilot is enough for you to say, hey, can I just see your operator ID and your flyer ID, because I believe that you have been flying in this area and I just need to check
Yeah,
that you're
absolutely,
that
yeah.
you're, you know, that you're the right class drone and the right qualification and that type of thing, etc.
Yeah.
So
And as Steve said before, that can relate to any offence.
yes,
You know, so it doesn't. Whereas I think a lot of people who are flying drones will naturally think, well, I haven't committed any, you know, A&O offences. Actually, you might have committed criminal offences or other offences that, you know, are known to us. So, you know, I think the easiest way to keep this is, you know, the police engage with the operator as little as often until that drone is landed safely. Once it's powered off, you can then have a reasonable adult conversation. And I think, you know, to get back up in the air pretty promptly would be a case of, you know, just follow through with the instructions that you've been given by the officer. You know, don't drag it out.
yeah.
As soon as you land it and we clear it up, you're back up in the air.
Exactly, and they just feel, because obviously with a lot of these shows that I've done now and the drone rule videos that we put out on this channel, etc., everything else, there almost feels like there's a line between, you know, and I suppose you sometimes get it on the traffic side as well, that there's a line between, oh, I'm driving, so it's traffic laws and things, but obviously the rest of the, you know, the UK legislation is still in effect. So you can't drive a car and shoot a gun out the window, but hey, I'm driving a car and there's nothing saying, you know, because of course there's a firearms offence there.
And that, that's the main
Yeah.
issue, is that you could, you know, and a lot of drone pilots, operators could be flying a drone legally and lawfully, but completely unaware that might be committing another crime or an offence or something else, whether purposely, you know, or not. So
Exactly.
something to think about.
No, indeed, yeah, which is very important, and thank you. It's a really good clarification, because I think, and again, we are talking about, you know, the more extreme side of things. I'm sure for the audience that are watching, the amount of times that we've all flown and actually had interactions with actual police officers is actually very low. For your you know, your common garden hobbyist, you're not going to be coming across the police too much. Often, of course, it's going to be happening when there is an issue. When an incident's happened, there's an issue that actually needs to be discussed, etc. So no, that's good clarification. Thank you. Is there anything else on the police power side of things that you wanted to mention before we moved on to the next section?
I think it's just to reiterate, you know, that training is going out to all the, you know, forces. We're not expecting every police officer to understand exactly the ins and outs of this. They are receiving training for it, and that's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be mindful of that. I know there's some understanding that some drone operators will understand the law better than the police officers, and you know what? That might be the case. But when you actually apply the legislation, you know, the physical law aspect of an offence,
Yes.
I can pretty much guarantee that a lot of drone operators, or even the public, don't really understand that.
Well, we'll actually, you're ruining my run order here,
Sorry.
Dan, because I was going to talk about this particular. Steve was shaking his head when you started. He hasn't read the run order. But actually,
I can't work with this.
we'll move on to that particular topic, and then we'll come back. But because this is a subject matter that comes up again a lot with my audience, as far as the emails and direct messages, is how to deal with a police officer who they feel doesn't know the drone code, doesn't know the drone rules, etc. And again, obviously, as I've said before, not letting anybody off or anything, but this is still a fairly recent thing that is under constant change. And you're talking about 1 gram could make the difference between what qualification or certificate and where you can fly things, etc. How should I, as a hobbyist, I mean, obviously, I'd like to think I know the drone rules quite well, although I know them well enough to know I don't know them, if that makes sense. How should I deal with a police officer who has very little knowledge that's approached me and says, "Why are you flying your drone?"
So for me, I'm new to the drone world, reasonably, and so when I'm flying, generally it's with a Mini, because that's all I can handle. Is that I will take a lot of the legislation with me, the cap, where, you know, 209 or 212 or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
I'll have that information with me, and I'll have everything else that I need in order
Excellent.
to speed the process up and relieve the officer's concerns. So I'm not, you know, I won't just jam it in their face or anything, and even I do it for members of the public as well. So if I go to a certain area where, you know, people say, well, you can't be flying here, well, actually I can. Yeah. And this says I can.
Okay.
You know, it's not. I know some people say, "Oh, I shouldn't have to do that." That's great, no problem. But if you want an easier life to you know, smooth the process over, and again, it's how you talk to the officer.
Yes.
And it's how the officer talks. So I get it's a two-way street, but
I mean, the end goal is to prove that you're safe and legal and flying within the rules.
that's it.
So if you're going to drag it out, what level of suspicion are you going to give an officer that you get in their face, you're confrontational. I mean, we deal with that day in, day out, but at the end of the day, we're just ensuring that, people can fly drones. And the more we promote the safe use of drones, the less more legislation and restrictions will come in place. And there will be a small handful that will take it beyond that line. And hopefully we'll catch up with them, we'll deal with them. But unfortunately, the majority of drone operators are very good. However, there is a small proportion that run the risk of ruining it for that wider audience. And and we see videos on YouTube and various other places that shows police powers being tested, etc. And I think we just need to focus on what are we trying to achieve. We are not trying to ban drones in the airspace. We want to promote them. Hence, obviously, I know we're obviously counter drones, but that is more from the criminal side of things.
And I would say hence you're coming on live YouTube channels, and I'm quite happy to say that we have zero written agreements between us as far as what we can and can't say and what we can and can't discuss, and actually our agenda is this or anything else like that.
It's exciting, isn't it?
It is exciting. But it is an open
Food, so that's why
it's an open conversation. Yeah, although the food's gone downhill a little bit, hasn't it? It's gone from catering to Pringles. Although I would like to congratulate you, Steve, for being the first meme of the show, because what was it, an hour and a half on the first show? We were about half an hour into this show, and I think that you can only handle a mini might well become our first meme from the show, but
excellent.
We might have to have that ready for next
I'm
time.
actually surprised my filter stayed working. I had so much to say.
Yeah, I did see you looking. I think that will have to be part of the meme, frankly. So that's good. That's excellent knowledge for people in terms of dealing with officers. I mean, I had a video where one of my friends who's an actor dressed up as a police officer, and it was the how not to get arrested flying your drone. And so I tried to approach it from that side of things, rather than, and this was obviously long before we'd worked together, how can we be prepared in terms of it? And I actually said, if you do get an officer that doesn't know the rules, and you have a rare occasion where they're being even more argumentative, my personal advice would be to back down, just do as instructed for that moment, and live to battle another day. And if you have to raise a complaint later on, raise that later on, etc. But
equally, if you want to challenge,
but how rare is that as well? Though
exactly. And I think if you want to challenge the officer, you don't have to be rude about it.
Yes,
you can just say, look, appreciate what you're saying. However, this is my understanding, and here's the proof of that. And have that conversation. I mean, it's almost like we're trying to tell people to act like adults. If the drone operator themselves was in our shoes approaching a drone operator, how would they want to be dealt with? They'd want to be treated with respect and dignity just as much as they would in return. So we're all adults. Yes, we might be enforcing legislation, but at the end of the day, it's all about the communication, and that works both ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, which I completely agree with, and
that's why you got locked up in that video you made.
He did actually arrest me at the end of it. Do you know the amount of people I got saying, does that police officer have a flyer ID, and which is actually a compliment to my friend who's a great actor. He has all the authentic uniforms and that type of thing. Bless his cotton socks. Okay, so we'll move on to the next sections. We'll move back up the run order after Dan ruined that. Thank you, Dan. And we'll talk about drone safety and risk assessment. Now, obviously, when you hear in terms of drone safety and risk assessment, you think CAA, and you think, drone code. Why is Sean asking two police officers on a show about enforcement about that type of subject? And the reason I'm raising it is really from that sort of enforcement point of view, and to try and stress to the audience and to get your opinion on how important things like pre-flight checklists and carrying out risk assessments to look at the different factors that are happening. We discussed a few before the show, and just how that can help in terms of reducing incidents, and therefore actually reducing my face time with police officers when my drone suddenly crashes into a building or something. So what would be your sort of tips, etc., as far as ensuring a safe flight and the pre-flight checklist side of things?
So quite simply, planning it, and even if it's your Class A flight has been quite spontaneous, you've got the intention that you're going to fly, whether that's, you're traveling around and you've got your drone in your car with the mindset that, if you see somewhere that looks good to fly, you'll jump out. You've got that mindset to begin with. And there's multiple apps out there that will identify your location. It'll understand what type of airspace you're in, and it's really key to understand what airspace you're in, because that has a massive impact of what you can do and whether you need permissions and stuff. But there's other stuff out there, similar apps that will give you naturally the weather for where you are. There's no point, checking the weather before you arrive, because we all know sometimes the reliability of, weather stations can be impacted for, and obviously give you, measures that aren't right for the flights, if you like. And things like checking your KP indexes, which will have an impact on a flight, the interferences. You've got, if you're traveling to a specific area that you are going to fly, just keep your eyes open and look around you. It might be that 20 meters or 200 meters away, you've got a large satellite. If you think of Jodrell Bank, for argument's sake, it's a huge satellite. But as you're traveling towards this, local knowledge is good. Understanding, is there airports nearby, railway lines, etc. So the stuff's out there. You don't have to pay for it.
No, indeed,
so
exactly.
Utilize it. It's there to help you. It's there to prevent you from committing offences, whether you're doing it deliberately or not. And I think, at the end of the day, you're flying a drone. You have to take full responsibility of the full actions that you undertake with that drone. So, there's lots of stuff. Again, looking at the general footing. If you're going to be stood somewhere to capture a really good shot off the edge of a cliff, don't put yourself right at the edge of the cliff.
Exactly.
Or at least have your drone returning to home where we can recover it. It's just common sense.
And with things like risk assessments, obviously, it's the level of risk assessment you're going to carry out can differ widely from the actual flight. If I'm flying in the middle of nowhere and there's no one around, I'm just that is almost my risk assessment. I'm flying a sub 250 drone. There is no one around. I'm not near any roads or buildings or anything else like that. I'm going to put the drone up fairly easily. When I'm in a town centre and flying a sub 250, I actually take photos around me very quickly to show the positioning of what was happening when I took off. So that actually, if anything does happen, I'm able to say, actually, no, that fire over there hadn't started, and there weren't 4 fire engines that have turned up in the last 30 seconds or something like that. And you're able to show that you've at least been responsible. So to me, risk assessment sort of is a sliding scale as well as far as the risk of the flight, of course.
I mean, we're not saying print off number of pages that you go through. Right, before I do this, by that time,
where's your risk assessment?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The weather front has now changed to the point that it took that long. But again, I think the majority of drone operators, certainly in built-up areas, are really good because they understand the risks, the impacts, the interference, etc. And I think sometimes the complacency can be when you're out in those areas that there's nothing around, because you just naturally think, well, I've got 360-degree view. It's a great day, but what if you've got low-level flying aircraft? Is it something that you need to check? Again, on these apps to see if it's a regular RAF route. If it is, put the call in and have that conversation. Because the last thing you want to do is fly around whizzing, around a field that you think this is great, and then all of a sudden you've got a heli-med or RAF
indeed,
rescue coming through. And again, the bottom line is when something goes wrong, regardless of what type of a risk assessment you've done, you're going to have to justify what you've done to negate that incident,
which is very much the absolute beginning and ending of all flights. You are accountable. If you decide that drone is going to take off, just because you're under 400 feet and it's only 100 feet away from you, it doesn't necessarily mean that's a safe flight. You have to be accountable, and of course, enjoy the hobby. It isn't about being, as you say, printing reams of paper off for you to fill out every time you take off with your drone. And everyone's position is different. Mine, yes, I do take photos sometimes, but because also I'm a YouTuber. So actually, if something goes wrong, I'd like to be able to. I would think I'd probably be held to higher scrutiny by the public as far as the crash, etc. So I go a little bit further, but not everybody has to do that. So
I think it's a good way of doing it, though, because if you're at a site and you think, could something go wrong? Yes, absolutely. Is there a strong likelihood of that happening, or a likelihood? Then Yeah, absolutely. Putting things in place.
I think things like town centres, if I'm, as I say, if I'm in the middle of a field or something and in the middle of nowhere, I'm not too worried. I'll put the drone up with a cursory risk assessment, and then I'll assess things as they go on, as we should. But obviously, if I was to fly somewhere in a location where we are now, obviously there's military and there's all sorts of stuff going on in this area. So my risk assessment would be much higher. I would have many more steps.
Bigger the risk.
And that's really what I say to people: is try to put those hurdles in your own way, as it were, so that as you were just saying when I blocked you, the bigger the risk, the more risk. So yeah, exactly. Okay, excellent. So that's good to get your views on that side of things. Next up, we're going to be talking about separation. And this obviously is the separation between uninvolved people. Now, of course, with sub 250 gram drones, we have the wonders of there being no separation from uninvolved people and even being able to fly over people. But lots of us rushed out and got our A2 CFCs expecting there to be lots of C1 and C2 drones and all these other things popping up within the next couple of months. And at the moment, we're flying legacy drones like the DJI Air 2S, the Mavic 3, even though technically the Mavic 3 would be a C1 drone. Of course, we don't have C labels yet, so it's still a legacy drone in the A2 category. In terms of how I work out my separation and also bringing the enforcement side of things into it, my concern is, how do I prove that separation to an officer that approaches me and that type of thing? How does that sit from an enforcement point of view? How sensitive is separation, the 50-meter separation for A2 CFC, etc., and how do I mitigate?
Well, I think the start for Tim would be if like Dan already said, if you plan and you've gone to an area and you've already worked out. It might even be that you want to, you might have to measure distances. It could be like, because if something goes wrong and there is an investigation, you can be sure that we will have to start measuring distances.
Yes.
So if you've done some planning, you've done you've mitigated as much risk as you possibly can. You're within the boundaries. You can't always, there's always, you could always have someone who walks into your area. That might happen. You can't control everything, And again, it's how you respond to that change of separation. That is going to be key. But really, for me, straight away, it's your planning. What steps you've taken to make sure that you are, within the correct distances.
And sorry to just add on to that.
Yep.
Steve, you're spot on there. I mean, it's part of that planning as well, is to say, well, in the eventuality of something happening, this is what I'm going to do. And that might be an incursion of, someone coming who's not involved in the flight, comes into that distance. What are you going to do? You're going to increase the height and you're going to increase the separation between you and them. Now, okay, yes, technically you've breached it, but common sense policing would be you've mitigated it by doing X, Y, and Z. Is an officer going to be putting you on paper for that? Absolutely not. Or I wouldn't expect them to. Anyway.
Yes.
Again, we want to do common sense policing, and we'd expect the public to apply common sense when they're flying and also doing that risk assessment. So, again, it's not overcomplicating it. Just have what you're going to do if this happens or that happens. What if? Always think the what if, because there's no point being in court in the dark explaining because something's happened when really it's something so straightforward you could have mitigated.
Okay, so in my mind, what the picture that's forming slightly is that we're talking, I don't know, if I was flying in a situation and when I took off, I'm in a residential area or something, but there's no one around, and one person walks in because they're walking past with their dog and they come within 40 meters and then I can see they're walking off again, then would mitigating be acceptable depending on the circumstances, etc., of course, because of course we're not a court of law here, we are, is that mitigating enough for me to assess that they're about to walk straight back out of my zone, so actually I don't need to do anything with my drone initially? If
it was as straightforward as that, which it's not, because every situation is going to be, it's got to be assessed based on its own merits, and again, going back to that common sense. But I think if the operator shows that they've identified the risk and that they've took a course of action to prevent that becoming a bigger risk, then I would say common sense needs to come in at that point to say,
And equally, if you don't apply,
precautions, indeed,
you don't change this, or you make the situation better and safer, don't be surprised if it, you know.
Yeah, if it becomes an issue.
Absolutely,
Yeah, indeed. And I've actually had a similar conversation to this with Jonathan Nicholson from the CAA when he came on, and he was explaining that obviously the whole thing's looked at. So yes, the drone has lost control and it's hit a building or it's hit a car or something's happened, but actually that drone flyer has their risk assessment for the area in place, and they can show all the steps that they've taken. Then actually it's an incident that's happened that can be dealt with, rather than the drone flyer just turned up, threw a drone in the air and doesn't care. Then the different levels of competence and the different levels of preparation that's gone into it can obviously affect the outcome as well. And
Absolutely. Accidents happen, and again, unfortunately, bringing back me traffic days in, car accidents happen all day, every day. Not everybody's prosecuted for that accidents, because again, it's based on individual circumstances. So yeah, it's just mitigating what could happen.
Which is also where I think some of the issue with enforcement and the drone rules comes into it, because people want an answer. If I fly my Mini 2 or my Mavic Air 2 from the corner of that road and I keep it under 400 feet, I've done a risk assessment, I do this, this, or this, I'm fine, aren't I? Because I'm not breaking laws. It's not as easy as that, is it? That just isn't how it works. As you're saying, the same with traffic. You can't assume because you're driving at 28 miles an hour down the road of a 30 mile an hour that you aren't breaking any other laws, etc. So is something.
Is every driver prosecuted for driving at 31, 32, 33, whatever it might be? No.
I hope
Why?
not.
Because again, unless it becomes an issue and it's a serious issue, then obviously it'll be looked at. But at the end of the day, the police have the magic discretion, and that discretion can be applied.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for that. That's it's an interesting one, because it's the separation side of things is something that comes up quite a lot in conversations that I have with hobbyists, because they want to be. These are the guys that have gone out and paid the money, got an A2 CofC. They want to do it properly. They don't want to actually cause an issue or cause. They don't want to be the person that's on the front page of the Daily Mail causing an issue for the hobby, etc., and that type of thing. So it's good to get that feedback. Thank you.
Just on that, then, obviously with the A2 CofC and the GVC, when you pass that, it is obviously a set of questions, revision, etc. It doesn't make you a competent drone operator. That comes with experience. So,
exactly.
For that.
Very well said.
So will I. But no, and there is, and I point that out because I think there is a sense of pride when you go through and you get your A2 CofC, and I know there's variations on cards that you can present and it looks good, but ultimately that just because you got a driving license doesn't make you a good driver.
You just have to think back to the first day you passed your test, wasn't it?
It's a privilege.
Am I a better driver now than when I passed my test? I hope so.
We've always said that.
Open debate, but
it's a privilege to have one. You don't, it's not given.
Yes,
you
exactly.
It's the same with your A2 and your.
Indeed.
TV.
And I would always say, advice as far as how to become a good pilot is exposure, isn't it? Is get out there and fly and get as many hours under your belt as possible, because all these types of circumstances will come up, frankly. So, okay, next up we're going to talk about something which is going to cause some controversy and some, but it's, we don't want to duck away from subjects that are too spicy, as it were. And we're going to be having a little talk about FPV. Okay. So you'll be glad to know I'm not talking about anything else. It's like, what's he going to bring up now? This is just drones, isn't it? You're looking on you. So the niche of FPV is something that I always describe as, we have this group of people, a very large part of the hobby, a very often experienced part of the hobby, that at the very first hurdle, because a lot do not and will not fly with a spotter, fall at that first hurdle of regulations. It's very hard to talk to that group about the wider regulations because of that. What is the enforcement view as far as the requirement of a spotter? Is there any difference between, if I'm flying under Article 16, 30 metres away from people in a park where people calls, and stood in a field somewhere in Wales? What are your views on the requirement for a spotter from an enforcement point of view, and how important is it?
Right. I'd say absolutely you got to have a spotter. I'm going to go from a very inexperienced drone flyer's point of view. I've not flown FPV, but I've seen Dan fly it in some of the areas we've been in. It's horrific. It's just so quick.
Horrifically good.
Yeah. No, but it is the speed they go.
It is fast.
For something which is you could just get straight off the shelf. and do that.
Yes.
And okay,
In
some
fact,
people,
you can get one off my shelf behind here.
There we
There's a
go.
DJI
I probably will have
FPV
that
drone
one
here.
away.
Yes. Yeah.
But, you know, some people say, "Oh, I've got great, you know, vision. I know what's happening in this." From in my point of view, you haven't, and you don't know what is round the corner. You don't know what's to the left of you or to the right of you, and the speed they go, you know. And we always use the, you know, the example of what happens. You know, there's a pram there, baby in a pram, and that drone goes, you know, might happen, but.
How would you combat the argument then that the FPV side of things have been going a long time? And I know, Dan, the FPV side of things is one of the areas that you started off in drone flying and modelling and etc. as well yourself. So you have some experience of it. In all that time, we haven't had, you know, dramatic incidents that are headline news and that type of thing. So is that not enough to say that flying without a spotter is safe?
No, and the reason being is FPV attracts a degree of operators. Not everybody, as Steve just said, it scares the hell out of him. And he wasn't even controlling it; he was just watching it.
I know, seriously. Almost made one of stick.
Yeah, and I think because of that, it doesn't attract a huge number of FPV operators. Now, those that will say, "Well, I'm FPV," yes, there is, but there's still a small minority of operators who have the confidence to do that and the confidence to do it without a spotter when they should have a spotter. And as Steve said, it's that field of vision view. And again, you know, it's, do you want to be, you know, in court trying to justify the reason why you didn't have a spotter because it's gone wrong? And it's always the case of, well, it's never happened to me, it's always happened to someone else. But FPVs, you've got a really short field of view. You can't see to your left, to your right, behind you. Now, when you're traveling at speeds of 60, 70, 80 mile an hour plus, things are rapid. So your decision making and your reaction time is impeded by that. But if you have a spotter who can say, listen, there's a tree, you know, because your situational awareness is gone when you go FPV, because, you know, yes, you might know the surroundings.
Yeah, which is a really interesting one actually, because that's often what's thrown back at me by FPV pilots is they feel they've got a very good situational awareness, but of course we're not necessarily talking about situational awareness looking out of the aircraft. Of course they've got an FPV view of what's going on board the aircraft, so yes, they can see if their specific drone is going to hit the tree they're heading towards and that type of thing. But we're talking about a wider situational awareness, aren't we, of their position, where the drone could be.
Yeah, I mean, they might have local knowledge. I mean, you could, let's just use the example where you're in the middle of a field, you know where the trees are, you're happy, okay, that's great, but what happens when low flying aircraft comes into that area? What happens if a member of the public comes along with the dog that you're whizzing between trees? You know, how is a member of the public going to jump out of the way of an FPV or even a racing drone? You know, this and those speeds, we're talking significant injuries which nobody wants to cause.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
No one goes out flying FPVs or drones intending to hurt someone. If they do, you know, drop your name on the comment box and we'll have a chat.
We'll have a visit.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, we've got to look at it with a degree of common sense, and, you know, can you see 360 degree constantly? Now, if you're not flying FPV, of course you can, because you're constantly looking around. You've got your eyes and ears. But when your field of vision is tunneled vision within the goggles, you even your hearing is impacted, because you're so fixated on the actual screen, the telemetry data that it's given to you, that, you know, anybody could just walk up.
Yeah.
You know, and before you know it, they're in your zone, and you have no idea until you come round swinging a left bank at 80 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden you see that, you know, through your FPV, the drone's on the ground. You wonder what you've hit. You'll think, oh yeah, it's a tree, but actually you just knocked someone over.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think it's good to get that sort of not even opinion, but that point on record, as it were, so that you know, people are aware that you know, it is seen at the moment from an enforcement point of view as very important to have a spotter when you're flying FPV. And I mean, it's an interesting point, because I would not call myself a competent FPV pilot. This and the tiny whoops that I'm training on are the only things I've flown so far. So I would not want to be anywhere near any kind of situation where I'm flying without a spotter. I probably want 4 spotters, and you know, and still be in a field that I know no one's going to be in. But it's an interesting situation, because of course it's seen as a hobby that there is a large a hill to climb to get over the top to be able to be competent in. You've got to build the thing. You've got to, set its rates and have it flying competently. You've got to learn how to fly in manual modes and acro, etc. But of course, we now have a lot of FPV drones like the one behind me that you can buy off the shelf and go for it. So I think there is that new side of the hobby that's coming into it, and it's always difficult. You can't just say, okay, you guys that know what you're doing and have ESP somehow can fly without spotters. It has to be a rule that is safe for all, doesn't it, basically?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, has there been a horrific accident, serious damage to someone involved in an FPV?
I think in the world there's only been a couple, and one of those was a 3D helicopter.
You can imagine that if that does happen and starts to happen, you can expect the laws and the rules to change around it.
Yeah.
Accordingly.
Yeah.
And we definitely don't want to go down that route where.
Yes. And flying without a spotter is increasing the risk of that
100%.
happening.
So
okay.
Keep spot, then things hopefully won't ever have to change.
Yeah.
It's a requirement at the end of the day, isn't it? And again, going back to the traffic days, how many times do we hear drivers saying out of nowhere, this come about and caused a crash? Well, what are we going to get with an FPV? Out of nowhere. Well, it's not out of nowhere. It's because you didn't have a spotter to tell you.
Yes.
And they've got that. And again, going back onto the spotters, for those that do have the spotters, well done, because you're flying the flag. For those that don't, have a word. But ultimately, having those comms as well. With the FPV operator, you've got to have direct comms with your spotters. So if any infringements do occur, you can quickly say, watch out. This is or I can actually hear a low-flying aircraft coming towards us. I can't spot it. Stop what you're doing. Just
indeed. Because, that spotter needs to be competent, but you need to still be aware that you're accountable for the spotter as well. So because obviously the spotter probably isn't going to be as competent as you in terms of drone flight, etc. So as you say, they're going to say, I can hear something, but you as an experienced pilot can whip the goggles off and you'll know exactly where it's coming from.
Eyes and ears more so than the actual pilot.
Yes.
The pilot is just engrossed and enjoying it.
Yeah.
It's the spotter who's probably doing all the work.
No, I don't disagree with that.
With a lot of our risk assessment in the police and bits and bobs in other areas, the saying is it's not an issue until it's an issue.
Perfect.
It's never a
Perfectly
problem
put.
until it's a problem. And then
yes.
There's always that question of no one's been killed.
Yeah.
There
sure
is. They
is.
said that before cars started, getting involved in accidents. It will happen, and all we're saying is don't be the one that it happens to. So you can have that blasé attitude.
But the thing is also, if it happens, surely we would prefer it was an FPV pilot with a spotter following the rules and everything else. So actually you can say, no, this is a responsible hobby and this is a rare accident, rather than it being actually
accidents will happen.
Instantly you've got things to throw at that person and say they're flying without spotters, they're irresponsible, let's get rid, basically, which is what we don't want to see. Just one very quick thing. I haven't been able to keep an eye on the chat myself, obviously, hence we've got a couple of moderators here in the building and a couple working remotely as well. So thank you guys for all your hard work this evening. Jake Robinson, thank you very much for your £5 super chat. I did see your message. And one thing I would stress is that some of the subject matter that we covers a wide gambit of drone fly, from hobbyists to audit channels to professional pilots to large companies, and everybody is welcome here in the live shows, and everybody's opinion is valid, because if we can bring all these opinions together and find the common ground and find a way to make these rules work for all of us, the hobby is going to exist a lot longer and have far less restrictions. And that is why I have no real issue, as long as everyone's being polite, which I know they will because the moderators are watching. Please, anybody that's saying they want to be quiet in the chat, etc., you're still more than welcome here. Absolutely everybody is, and I know you guys would support that as well. We want to reach every single part of the drone flying community, don't we? Really, we want to bring everybody together to find a way to make these rules work, frankly. So going from one, thank you for, there's been a couple of controversial points tonight, which I know will have mixed popularity out there. But again, it's good to know what the position actually is, so people know the facts. Because again, with FPV, there's a lot of folklore around it. Sort of, if I don't fly with a spotter, they don't really care. Well, so actually, what I've learned very, very quickly is you do care. It is one of those points that has to be very, very clear. Now, another area of focus which came up between our shows, and also that we had a lot of viewers contacting us regarding, just before I started, thank you very much, Fishing Frustrations UK. Thanks for more info on drones. Thanks for your £5 super chat. Really appreciate it. is talking about flying drones in and around EMS, emergency services operations, basically. And of course, you've got a mixture of things from, fires and crime scenes. I mean, I could list the reasons why there'd be a police tape around an area for a certain amount of time, and there's hundreds of reasons why that could be happening. What is the situation? What is the advice as far as drone operators? Can I, if I see a police incident happening down the road here, can I go down there, put my drone up, stand a decent way back, and put my drone up and go across and film it? What is the situation with that?
Firstly, if there's something going on and you've got your drone up there and no one's come over to interact with you or deal with you, you're not causing a problem. Hopefully that will be the end of the matter.
Excellent.
However, if you are, or if someone does come and challenge you or come talk to you and ask you to ground your drone, there's probably a really good reason for it. And it's a good chance you won't understand or be aware of what that reason is, or might even not even have thought about it. There's lots of different reasons why we need a drone or need that airspace clear.
Okay.
It could be, there's stuff to do with morals and health of the public about gratuitous pictures.
Yes.
If it's an accident or this. There could be tactical advantage for us, or if something's going on, we don't want people to see there's certain issues or certain things or processes. It could be that we need the airspace clear because we might have a helicopter coming in, HEMS or anything else. We might have to put our own drones up if it's a search for,
yes,
for a
absolutely.
missing child or a vulnerable anybody. And we can't do that safely if the airspace is busy. So there could be various different reasons, genuine reasons why, we need that airspace
clear.
And flying within close proximity or inside emergency, response area, we have the legal framework, and that is an offence, and we can deal with it appropriately.
Okay.
Ideally,
Yes.
it will be, can you bring your drone down? We'll explain to you why. Hopefully that explanation, and that will be the end of the matter.
If there is an officer stood by the tape and not sort of engaged in the operation, I'm not sort of saying go and tap on a crime officer's shoulder or something, but if there is an officer that seems to be available, as sometimes if you have the resources there can be, is it acceptable to approach them and say, hey, I'm about to fly my drone, I'm going to be over here, I'm not going to be in the way, is there any reason why I shouldn't?
I think that's really good, because that message will then get fed back to the drone teams, whether it's fire, ambulance or police. And I think, again, as Steve said, if we know it's there and it's not going to impact what we need to achieve,
yes,
then there's no problem. The problem we've got is that distance is probably not always good enough, and they always edge further forward.
Yes.
Now, I think when you are notified by a police officer, that is your direction of that emergency response is in place. It doesn't have to be on any of the drone apps to say that it's enforceable.
Okay.
It's a police officer physically saying to you, we have a police incident ongoing. And I know, in particular areas around the UK, I've had contacts with the emergency services where they've had increasing issues where they're trying to do their job. And, if you think the emergency services are there to protect life and property, if a drone starts coming in and starts impeding what we're trying to do, that is ultimately going to have the impact onto the victim who we're trying to safeguard. So again, it's having consideration not only for the incident and those working in it, but it's also the reason why we're there.
Yes.
Who we're trying to help. So if you're instructed and directed by a police officer that this is an emergency response, ground your aircraft. There is a legal requirement to do that.
Okay.
Certainly, if we will obviously suspect that you're committing an offence because you are that close enough that the police have had to come and speak to you in the first place.
Okay. And then you're kind of mixing the thing as well of that if you're reasonable of suspecting an offence, you can ask me to land my drone anyway. So it kind of comes into that flow.
Isn't it? So all those legislation powers now become an open game.
One thing I would say as well, from my point of view, and conversations that I've had with hobbyists regarding this, is that think about what's going to happen. What's the problem when we fly my drone over there? It's not necessarily you having an issue with it, but officers or anybody working within that scene, they don't know if that drone is connected to what's going on in there. There are so many reasons, there are so many issues that could make your drone flight a problem above that scene, which again is why perhaps just walking walking up and saying, hey, do you mind if I do this? And they can say, no, absolutely no chance. Please don't come anywhere near it, sort of thing.
And the other thing to note is that it doesn't matter how long the incident could last days. So the blue lights have stopped flashing. It could seem really slow and it's just people milling around. But until that incident's turned to what we call steady state policing, could be 4 days, could be anything. That is, the rules still stand that you can't fly over that.
And you'll know that from the fact that the tape is still there and that there's still a presence there. There's often a police van parked somewhere with a chap sat in it, isn't there? Sort of,
Even without the tape, if you're being directed by a police officer, you are in an emergency response.
Of course, because
whether you like it or not,
it can also be the other side of things, of course, that it isn't days later, it's just started happening. So actually it could have happened since your drone's gone in the air and now it's a problem, etc. So
and I think if you are a drone operator that wants to capture that footage, or even media, will pop up now and again to get that coverage. You've just got to sort of ask yourself, what are they doing here? They are trying to safeguard someone. By me doing this, I'm going to attract their attention, which means they're going to drag them away from what they're trying to do to deal with you trying to fly a drone.
Yes. When
common sense should say, let them just get on with the job.
Okay. Because I think sometimes it comes down to the sort of, and again, this is only a minority, but we'll feel, why are they worried about us flying there and that type of thing? But I think it's trying to get the message across that there are so many reasons.
Oh, yeah.
And just from the fact that they don't have to rule you out as being connected to it because you're now flying a drone over to see what's happening.
And that's why it's good that, the fact that you're being told there and then is really useful, because you may want to have a good debate with the police officer, but we're not in a position all the time to have that conversation. So you will be approached because you are suspected of committing an offence, which opens all the different powers and legislations, and we will ground that drone. And if need be, that drone will be seized as well, including your mobile phone, the controller with it. So just think about the bigger picture. By all means, fly if it's not going to impede. But if you do get approached by fire, ambulance, or police to say, look, either land or you're too close, consider moving further away.
Yes. Okay, but I would, which is fantastic, and it's good, and that's exactly why we're asking these questions, to get these hard and fast answers. But I would also remind the audience of Steve's initial response, which was, if you're flying and there's no approach, that type of thing, crack on, you're okay, because obviously there isn't an issue. But again, I suppose that comes down to visibility as well, doesn't it? From the point of view of, if you're flying a drone near and you're aware of anything happening like that, don't hide away.
Yeah, don't hide. Don't try and hide in the shadows. If you are flying, then be open about it.
Yeah,
I would think more of an operator saying, I'm intending to fly, because at that point, before I go through my checks and everything else, if you're telling me then, do you know what, you're not flying because we've got an emergency response, I've just saved myself a hell of a lot of time.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Approach the police.
Yeah, exactly.
And just say, look, I can do this. It's not going to impede, providing you with,
which I think is a good example of that drone flight would technically be legal under the CAA drone rules, but it's illegal for other reasons.
Yeah,
so
and
it doesn't matter if you know that or not, frankly. Yeah. So yes.
And I think just be mindful that just because you are flying in the CAA rules, that you're not automatically free from criminal offences.
Yes, exactly. Excellent. Okay, well, we'll move on from that next subject to going through some questions, some Q&A. So the exciting thing here is we're operating without a safety net. Would you like a break? Okay. I'm just going to play a viewer video here, and I'm going to make someone's day now. This is a young chap who's one of our co-hosts called Tony McGinn. I'm going to play one of his videos. He is one of the prime examples that I hold up, and the reason why he's become a co-host is because he's a really great drone flyer. He gets out there and flies, but he sticks to the rules as well, which I really respect. Hence, I can have him on as a co-host. But we'll play out your video now, Tony. Enjoy. Okay, thank you very much for bearing with us for that. It's a very short comfort break. It seems that the bladders of YouTube hosts are legendary. But Steve, we have a message in the chat that seems to be concerned as to your welfare, which I think we should clear up, especially as you left the room suddenly.
Yeah,
about the fact that your hair has got greyer since last time, whether that's flying the Mini or the FPV scare.
Taking a bit of heat on the old chrome haircut. No, that's a fair point, actually. It might have been watching Dan fly the FPV with the goggles on, but
Scared a few more grey hairs.
Hence the tiny bladder. I'm just getting old, basically.
Okay, well, I think as these shows go on, we're going to have to get a grey hair update. I mean, I can't hardly talk. I've got literally a grey beard these days.
Yeah,
And that's the only other problem with being on YouTube is if you look back a year and my beard was black, and it shows you aging, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there you go.
But thanks for pointing it out.
Purple shampoo. Yeah,
Hey, no
that's his
problem.
favourite.
We are here to help. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Q&A side of things, and these are some questions which have come in the chat during the show this evening. So thank you again, everybody, for engaging and asking these questions. This one comes from DJ Audits in the chat, and it reads: should drone pilots remain silent and ignore anyone speaking to them whilst flying, including a police constable?
No. Simple as that, because if you're directed to land the drone and you don't, commit an offence.
Okay.
Simple as that. I mean, and again, it goes back to what we were saying before. As a drone operator, you can multitask. If you can't safely operate a drone while someone is in the distance talking to you, then I'd be questioning whether you should be flying a drone. And
this probably comes from the whole Article 240, 241,
Yeah,
not interfering with an aircraft type thing.
Again, that's been blown out of proportion. I think, people have looked at that 241 article and said, well, how can I make this as difficult as possible so the police don't engage? The bottom line is there's a power, there's a requirement to do it. You do it. If you ignore it, you commit offences. It's that simple.
Okay.
And it might be a case of just saying, I know you're there. I'm aware that you want me to land the drone. I'm going to do that. And it's not a case of finishing off what you're doing. It's to land it as soon as practicable, not take the mick.
Okay. So that's that question from DJ. Thank you very much for asking it. Next up, can the officer ask to see the video from an FPV feed or from my drone feed? That comes from Denis Matovic. And Denis, I hope I haven't killed your name there, Denis Matovic, but thank you for asking the question. So effectively, whether it's FPV, whether it's flying or the drone with it, can you ask to see the footage that I've captured?
Ordinarily, no. There's no specific requirement, to do that, but it depends on what we suspect. What offence do we suspect it's been committed? So it might be that by you showing that footage, it can quickly de-escalate the situation. It can also resolve the situation really quickly. So again, if for argument's sake it was a serious offence, then there may be a requirement to delve that little bit deeper, and there might be a requirement for it. But
the only time we would be under very different legislation, which would be under terrorism legislation, and you'd probably be talking about someone
Crikey.
the fair
Okay.
use of drones for maybe reconnaissance or something
So,
like
so,
that.
so there is a
Very, very
conversational part of it as well, though, of course, isn't there? So there is the fact that you're talking to an officer and they want to see your footage. Then, if you don't mind showing them, I mean, I personally, again, I don't have an issue with it, so I would show them the footage.
If you've got nothing to
But
hide,
if you don't want
it's
to, but if you just don't want to, then there isn't a specific power. But obviously, it can escalate depending on what's happening, basically.
yeah, absolutely. And if there's justification for an offence has been committed or you suspect it, can you seize the drone to go with it? Absolutely, power's there.
Okay, excellent. This comes from Kayaking Graham. Graham, thank you very much for your question. How many police in the UK have been, and they put the inverted commas, schooled in the current legislation with drones? So how is that going?
It's an ongoing task. We are doing incredible amount of work in schooling the response police around the country. As you can imagine, their job and role is absolutely vast. And as you know, we would have spoken on the last show about the priorities for policing.
Right.
Yeah, but we for this community, this is a important priority. However, for across the
I suppose sliding scale side of things. Do I want the officer knowing everything about the drone rules, or do I want if someone breaks into my house that I can call 999 and know those boys are going to turn up and help?
What we are trying to facilitate is methods to get information to frontline officers. in a quick manner in order for them to do the relevant investigation and to be more empowered to with the legislation to make those decisions. But it's an ongoing piece of work. There's lots of work going on in it. But to educate the officers would be in a much better place, because then you're less likely to have this situation where you've got the drone pilots probably knowing a bit more than the cops on the street, just pure to the amount of information they've got to retain and know. It's almost impossible.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, and thank you very much for your question, Kayaking Graham. Next up from GHL, please can they give some examples of what those crimes might be if they're not drone flying crimes? So I think here they're talking about what might happen, in flying the drone. What other rules can you break? What other laws can you break?
Free reign, really.
Antisocial
The book.
behaviour.
Yeah. Get the book out.
Harassment, alarm and distress to other people. It could be voyeurism.
Aggravated trespass. I think we touched base on it on the first show.
Yeah.
About the drone itself commits the offence of aggravated trespass. It doesn't have to be the operator; it's the actual drone. And some people might be aware of recent outcomes to those that might have been found guilty of that. But harassment, voyeurism, as I said, antisocial behaviour.
And aggravated trespass, I know we did discuss it in the last show, but very quickly, is the position where I've been asked to leave, which obviously can be civil from the point of view of a civil trespass, and then if I don't, it can be that can trigger it, and also of course the thing of I go into a Costa Coffee and sit in the middle of the and stop them from operating, etc.
Trespass becomes aggravated when you're preventing people from going about their lawful business.
Okay.
Or things that they're entitled to do, so for example, when we deal with public order and it's trespass, they go into Starbucks or wherever other coffee shops available. But then if they start sitting down in the aisle and preventing people from going across their business and doing this, then it becomes aggravated. So if you're enjoying the comfort of your garden, and there's an expectation up to a certain height, you should be able to play frisbee and football and do this and do that.
Yeah.
Although we don't own the airspace, if that drone is now dropping to a height where it's a problem or it's affecting their private life, their home life, you've got human rights, all that sort of stuff, then that could become aggravated. So hopefully, I'd like to think that the officer might explain the actions of what you're doing and the possibility that if you carry on, this could happen. Therefore, it might be good to change your direction or your course of actions, and hopefully everything could be avoided.
Excellent, but that does answer the question, so thank you very much. Next up from Fishery Promotions, something about people in fisheries and fishing, kayaking and watery names this evening asking the questions. What's the thoughts on remote ID? Do you guys have any sort of thoughts? I mean, obviously it's not something that's particularly in the press here in the UK, although I think most people know it's going to be coming at some point down the line. Obviously in America with the FAA, it's very much a very hot topic at the moment. But do you have any views on whether remote ID is needed, is valuable, or?
It's a really good question, and I'm sure it'll be one that's up there for debate. Personally, I don't have an issue with it, because when I go flying, I'm going to be flying within the rules and regulations. So having a remote ID that is broadcasting my location when I'm not using it for illegal activity, why would I have an issue with that? If you think mobile phones are tracking everyone.
Yes.
So what's the difference with a drone?
Yeah.
I completely understand some people might not like it, but again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to promote drones, and we're trying to highlight those that are using drones for criminal intent. Going back to the offences, you might have a drone that's being used to fly contraband into a prison, or using a drone to like we said, the voyeurism, to spy on your neighbours and stuff like this. By having that remote ID, it gives us the ability to negate a potential offence, support or negate an offence, really. So again, as long as you're using the drone for legitimate purposes, why would you worry? What's the issue? Same with the car. If you're using the car for legitimate reasons, what's the issue?
Yeah.
If you're not, everybody who's using it legitimately will want us as the police to target those that don't.
Yeah, no, indeed.
Yeah,
It's an interesting one because for me, remote ID has very much two sides of the coin. I can understand why people perhaps wouldn't want to be tracked if you don't have to be tracked. But actually, I do see with remote ID and UTM a lot of benefits as far as actually opening up airspace. This is why I'm a big promoter of the current drone rules, because they open up the airspace in comparison to the old rules, as we now call them, massively, in my opinion, personal opinion there. Okay, so up next is, we don't actually have who this was from, so apologies if you did ask this question, and thank you for asking it. With the no-fly zones in DJI, is it no-fly or no-fly above a certain altitude? And this is an interesting one, actually, because I think a lot of people, and some people, a lot of people over-rely on the DJI no-fly zones, don't they?
Massively, yeah. I mean, do you want to answer it?
No.
So yeah, basically with the DJI, it's an added safety feature. It's not lawful or unlawful. So it's a guide to give you an indication. But if you follow the drone code and check your NOTAMs to make sure that it's not restricted airspace or a temporary restricted airspace,
Yes.
then you'll be fine. But don't rely purely on DJI geofences.
No, indeed.
Because some of them might just be advisory notices as well as no-fly zone. And again, you know, we can touch base maybe on another, you know, section of this, that the DJI system has various levels of authorizations, and that can come down to whether you're an authorized DJI account, what you're flying, where you're trying to fly, etc. And there's different processes to get around that.
Yes.
But yeah, it's there as an added protection, but it's not there to be.
And it's important to stress as well that because DJI on the app tells you you can fly or not fly, that is not due diligence. You are not ticking any boxes there. That is just DJI put an extra layer of safety on their drones. They produce a map with you know,
like your speed restrictions. You've got a red ring. That's compulsory. You've got a black ring that is saying advisable. So again, you know, it's not saying you have to do, you know, 60, it's got a black ring around it. It's just advising this is the safe speed to actually go around this bend.
Exactly.
If you want to take it faster, fine, but then there's going to obviously be a justification as to why. And equally, you know, it's exactly that. It's just
excellent. Thank you.
It's intent as well. If that geofence in there or whatever, or the rat, but you still find your drone is there, then there's a good chance you've circumvented a couple of systems that say please don't be there or do not be there.
Yes.
Instruction. For me, on the other side, that shows me that your intent is, you know,
absolutely, completely agree.
I don't think we want to focus a lot on DJI because there's a lot of other drone platforms out there. There's home built,
and there is no legal reliance on any manufacturer. No manufacturer is,
absolutely,
it is this the CAA drone code. If you learn that backwards and follow all of the 33, 34 points to it, then you know you are going to be covered because you're going to be checking your airspace the proper way. And I find that there's something much better than having to rely on a piece of software like that. Actually knowing yourself, being confident, you actually enjoy the flight a lot more as well because you know you should be there.
I think the purpose of it there is just to ensure that you're flying safely. And I mean, ultimately, as a manufacturer, they're just trying to assist you in enjoying the hobby.
Exactly.
You know, and
other manufacturers are available.
Well, absolutely, yes. But you know what I will say is, you know, if you do fly a DJI, and quite often you'll be prompted with a DJI FlySafe update. What that does is that updates the geofences around the UK. So, you know, quite often, and I've been there myself, you know, you might update the geofencing yesterday, and then you come to go and fly the day after, and you say, do you know what? I don't need to. There's no legal requirements.
Exactly.
And do you know what? I updated it yesterday.
Yes.
However, that could mean a crucial difference between where you're flying now could have become
Yes, and checking it on the apps and checking NOTAMs, etc. The Lancaster bomber video that we put out yesterday is a prime example of where someone flies the same spot really regularly, but actually, if they were checking all of the apps, if they were checking everything, they would have known something was happening and could have taken steps. You know, you just don't know what's happening just because you fly that park every single Sunday, and this isn't in an FRZ. I'm miles away from the airport. Something could be happening in that area that will be notified, etc. So it's important.
Goes back to your very first question. But it's about your planning.
Yeah.
Your risk assessment, everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, couple more questions left. What would be classed as being too close to another drone operator stroke emergency operator?
Operator or an emergency situation?
Well, the question was drone operator stroke emergency operator.
All right. So, for example, we have had it where you've got fire brigade have had to bring their drone down because of drones being in the area. Basically, if you're presenting any danger to any person or the property, or if you're affecting the response of the emergency services, if you're making them have to do something else as a result of you being there,
You're too close.
you're too close.
Yeah.
That's your start
Yeah.
then, really. And if they've got to come and have a conversation with you, the likelihood is
Yeah.
you're too close.
Because a big word there is conflict, isn't it? From the point of view that if you're creating a conflict with a fire, I mean, there's even actually ambulance drone operators now in the north of the country, official drone units of the ambulance service. And if you're creating a conflict, the same as if you were with manned aircraft, as a professional pilot themselves, as a responsible emergency service, they have to land. So you're taking that resource
At 100%.
straight out the air, which is
if they're having to deal with that deconfliction, then like you said, that bit, a really key bit of equipment that could have been given that unit oversight and that aerial view, that's now gone, and so the impact could be massive.
yes, exactly.
And
Thank
it
you.
might not be the distance that is the issue. It might be your manner of flying. Are you flying
Yeah.
aggressively?
Yeah.
For argument's sake, and that could be enough for someone to go, well, you're not close enough to cause a crash, but the way you're flying actually concerns me.
Yeah. The next question is from Dennis Williams, and Dennis, thank you for asking this question because it is a really interesting one, and we've had an entire video just on actually flying a drone from your own garden and that type of thing, where we always say make sure you get up and out before you are crossing people's land. But he says thanks for the great information. So firstly, thank you, Dennis, for coming along and watching. What is considered a reasonable height over private property for a sub 250 gram drone? So therefore we don't have separation issues, of course. But what would you as police officers consider as a reasonable height?
This is my house, 120 meters.
I mean, it's a good question. There's no set height in law as to what you can do. If you're, again, just think of you as the operator that's flying over someone's house that's not yours. One, I'd be questioning why.
Yes.
If it's your own house, fine, you can go as close as you want. But if it's someone else's house, why are you even doing that? Then you've then got to be considerate and mindful of the people that live there. Are you going to go about disrupting their lawful activity that they're going, the right to privacy? And I suppose that goes on to privacy laws there straight away. And this is where we go into, other criminal offences, not just A&O offences. So there's no set height, but I would use, again, common sense with a view of if this was your house and a drone was above it, what would you be acceptable with? Yeah. And before anybody comes back and says, well, I'm quite happy for a drone to be right up to the window, there's a separate group for that.
Be reasonable. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. If you launch it in your own garden, take it up as high as you possibly, and then if you are going to take it out.
Yeah, indeed. And in our video, we actually recommended a little slip of paper through your neighbour's doors.
Yeah.
I fly a Mini 2 drone. I'm not going to press record. My gimbal is not going to be pointed at your gardens. If you don't want me to do this, talk to me.
That's a really good one.
And when we put that in the video, people did this and actually had people knocking on the door, asking questions, and then they were happy. So actually, again, it's that whole being open about what you're doing, isn't it? And it's the thing about a flying camera that people have to understand, that it can be seen as a voyeurism thing and that type of thing, as a concern. And for someone that's never flown a drone, you suddenly get this thing flying over and you can see it's got a camera and that type of thing. You don't know if it's got and they have got 30 times zooms these days, etc. I used to be able to say they don't have zooms, but even standard consumer drones can zoom 4 times up now. And it's just important to have those conversations and be open about the flight as well, isn't it, really? Because a lot of the time, whenever I get emails and DMs from viewers who have had issues with their neighbours, it's because the neighbour is assuming something bad is happening, which is often the thing when you don't.
And it's hard not to, because you will see your house, your garden, and right up to space as being yours. Unfortunately, we don't own the airspace.
Yes.
So, yes, a sub 250 gram can fly legally over your garden. But again, like you said, if the gimbal, i.e., a camera, is not facing, then I suppose the advice is don't.
And you're telling them that you're not recording, and don't record. That's the other thing as well. Don't record.
And we're seeing a lot of these drones now being used by estate agents. Again, I mean, I was with the father-in-law, and I use the drone to check a property that he's got to check the tiles. You know, using a sub 250-gram drone.
You take a bit of roof surveying.
A bit of roof surveying.
Bit of roof inspection.
Yeah.
Nice.
And there was he didn't even
Multi-talented.
pay for it either. I just get that in before
Yeah.
the high-type brigade jump on. But we're seeing a lot of this. So my advice would be, don't automatically assume that it's being used for, you know, and again, we are counting drones, but we are promoting drones at the same time. Don't assume that it's being used for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Have a conversation. Approach your neighbour as you would, again, expect to be approached by them. But for those that are doing roof inspections or housing estates and stuff, again, part of that planning is they will know that they're going to do it and they're going to take a photograph to upload to the website. So, again, as Steve said, part of that planning would be to go to the neighbours and say, look, on this date, this time, we're going to put a drone up. We're only interested in this. And you can... It's been understandable to your neighbours. You know, anybody who's going to be concerned about it. Just give them a bit of a reassurance.
And there's also, of course, the factor of get on with it. So if you're going to fly your drone and you know it's going to have to go, you know, if you're in the middle of gardens and you know you're going to have to go across people's gardens, get up, get out.
Don't
sort of, you know, have the drone hang there for 5 minutes while you're sorting yourself out and, you know, adjusting your phone and that type of thing. Be ready. Be aware of where you're taking off from.
And if you're tempted to...
You talk about zooming, that's literally going to take me 20 minutes.
Yeah,
my battery goes before
battery's up, I think. Absolutely spot on. And I think, you know, don't be putting yourself in a position where you think it's funny to start antagonising a reaction from your neighbour.
Good Lord, no.
Because, you know, neighbour disputes do happen. And again, there is an aggravated trespass. There are offences out there other than A&Os that, you know, if you are seen or, you know, reported to be committing offences, the police will deal with it. And there are multiple offences out there that not everybody knows about. And granted, not a lot of police, not all police know about it, because we've got to focus on what are the priorities of policing. You've got your vulnerable adults, violent crime, you know, domestic violence. They are the key priorities. Drones will become a priority when those operators decide to take it beyond the line. And, you know, for us, our message to you guys is fly within the rules and regulations, whether you like it or not, because it's going to prevent any additional coming in the future. And we want to promote, you know, that use of drones. It is the future, and I think we just need to embrace it. And
because obviously, you know, we're aware that you guys are called the National Police Chiefs Council's counter drone team, but the counter drone bit is the nefarious activity, is the criminal activity. It isn't the hobby. You know, and actually, you know, I don't want to sound like a spokesman for you guys, but I've got to know you guys quite well over the last few months, and the impression I get is that, you know, a safe, responsible hobby actually helps the criminality shine out even more. Because you don't have your average drone pilot breaking every rule possible, and actually who is the criminal here? And actually that guy hovering his drone over that farmland is more of a problem because everybody else is acting responsibly, and those criminals shine out more, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think some operators will go beyond their limitations.
Yes,
you know, we're flying. You know, they will fly beyond the 500 meters, beyond visual line of sight, etc., etc.
Yes, beyond experiences me when I fly this thing for sure. It's
and the thing is that's there because I think there's always a temptation of, I can just do that little bit more, little bit more, and yes, that does happen. We want to nip that in the bud with common sense policing, because if we can nip it in the bud, we're going to prevent you from getting that real cocky attitude of, actually, I'm going to do this. I can make my own risk assessment. You know, I might have been told I can't fly in an FRZ, but you know what? I know my drone. I know my capabilities. I'm not going to impact manned aviation. So,
because that's where more rules come from, isn't it?
Exactly.
And you know, harder rules that will become, you know, will take the enjoyment of the hobby away from it. At the moment, we've gone into a situation where we can now fly sub 250-gram drones without separation from people in congested areas, just by reading the manual and getting an operator ID. I mean, it isn't much to ask, is it, to follow those basic rules? So it's
you're flying a drone because you enjoy it.
Yeah.
You're either going to ruin it for the future of everyone else, or you're going to keep it going.
Yes, exactly. It's starting to sound like us lot having a coffee now around the. God, those damn criminals, and another thing. Excellent. Well, that's all of the questions for this evening. Thank you guys for coming along. Is there anything else that you wanted to? Any other messages or anything else you wanted to get across to the audience? Obviously, we'll be back soon with another program. But is there anything else you want to get across?
No. Well, main thing for me is, I think Dan's just reiterated, really, it's a real positive thing. and I'm new to the drone community. I absolutely love it. Wouldn't want it to change and, you know, to be more heavily policed and with legislation, this, that, and the other. And although a lot of stuff we've spoken about tonight could be seen as negative or, you know, discussion points. I get that, but our point of view really and our output going forward is positive.
Yeah.
And
the percentage of flights for all of the stuff that we've talked about today is giving people information and giving them that backup and knowledge that they know what is probably going to happen, because there's always individual circumstances, individual officer and everything else like that involved, what's probably going to happen. And, you know, the percentage of flights that are even going to be affected by the things we've talked about tonight is actually very small. Yeah. The vast majority of people just get on and enjoy the hobby, follow the rules, and,
There's plenty of places to fly a drone.
Yeah.
If you do your research
and you're
planning, there's plenty of places to fly.
Exactly.
If you say there isn't, that's because you're just assuming you can just decide there and then.
No, indeed.
Planning, which I'd be glad that you're not flying.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much, as I say, for both of you joining us. I want to give a big shout out to the backroom crew of bringing us drinks and dealing with the chat and moderating. Thank you very much to our moderators who are acting remotely as well. You've really helped this evening. It's been fantastic. Thank you as well to Fishing Frustrations UK for becoming a member of the Geek Squad. I really appreciate that, showing some direct support of the channel. And we'll see you next time. There will be another one of these shows in a slightly different format coming soon, so keep an eye out. If you're new here, hit subscribe, and if you wouldn't mind, there's a great number of audience watching right now, if you could all go and hit the like button or the dislike button if you didn't like it, but I'd rather you hit the like button, so it does help with the YouTube algorithm. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Like and subscribe. I have to be a YouTuber at some point.